Griffin in Tampa, Florida, and Mihaela Telecan in Melbourne Beach, Florida, for our weekly low-carb chats. Thanks for tuning in today. We apologize for last week. The technical difficulty was on my end. My studio, which is actually my consult room in my office, is just not a great facilitator for internet. So I'm back up in my regular office, which is not as pretty, but I don't think anybody really cares about that. But welcome. So today what we're wanting to really get into is kind of the nuts and bolt questions that people have regarding low carb living, sort of side effects, pitfalls, troubleshooting. We really want to address some questions, and in the past several weeks I have been accumulating some questions from people in my practice, people in my life, friends, family as well, and we're going to ask those questions today, and we're going to help out our viewers figure out the troubles they're having either initiating or maintaining this lifestyle. So Mihaela, how are you doing today?
I am doing excellent.
Excellent. We're good. So if you don't mind, why don't we get right to it with the questions, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so this one came up just yesterday. So this is our low carb Q&A. This question came up yesterday. I get this one quite a bit. We have someone who is tried the low carb for just to give a little history here, they did Atkins in the past, had really great success with the Atkins diet many years ago. The person now is a pre-diabetic, taking a drug called metformin, which does not necessarily lower the blood sugar. So we don't have to use as much caution with a drug like metformin. But now they've been on low carb for about 6 weeks, and they cannot get into ketosis. They're not losing weight. Their body's size is not changing. They're not noticing that their clothes are fitting them differently. And the biggest complaint, they say they feel so darn tired all the time. So I had a few ideas, but what ideas do you have? And I'll give you one more detail. They limited their carbohydrates to 60 grams per day, okay? And they're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and perhaps some snacks in between. So that's the information that we have. So let's help out this person and give some good advice, okay? So go ahead.
So, do you hear an echo? Or it's only on my end?
I think it's on your end.
Oh, okay. It's kind of annoying. Maybe it will go away. So the person is for 6 weeks is doing about 60 grams total carbs a day.
Right.
Are they? So it's many ways to measure if this works and how it works. And you've mentioned few like body size, changing in weight, or like just circumference.
Right.
Inches. As well as energy and or blood sugars, right? So for them, since they're pre-diabetic, maybe one way for them to see if they are low enough on carb would be to measure their blood sugars, their fasting, as well as postprandial after eating or between meals.
Okay.
To get a curve to see more or less how their response to the amount of carbs they eat is. They're probably very insulin resistant. So, which I don't know if you have any numbers on their insulin level. So it may.
Yeah, they don't have that measured yet.
Mm-hmm. So it may take longer for them to resensitize the body. Fasting, it's another way for them to do like a reset, to see if they would fast at least a dinner to dinner fast, just water and maybe a tea or a coffee with fat or chicken stock or beef stock. If they feel tired all the time, I would tell them to look at the amount of salt they are eating.
Okay.
Because this is the phase of adaptation. And we know people get these flu-like symptoms where they feel tired and the mind seems to be more foggy and they have energy, they don't have energy. It's like a lot of fluctuation and almost like zombie zone.
Right.
I suggest to pay attention to how much sodium they have in their diet, because two things we are afraid, right? When we start this, in general, not even when we start anything, we are afraid of fat and we are afraid of salt.
Right.
That's something we've been taught for a long time to stay away from. So salt as well as fat. So hopefully they eat enough fat so they feel satisfied, they don't feel hungry or deprived. But then as we lower carbohydrate intake and insulin levels drop, we lose more sodium through urine when we pee. The body gets rid of excess salt. So it's a good idea to make sure you bring enough salt in the diet and to keep all the other electrolytes in balance, potassium, magnesium. So that's why a good natural source of sodium and potassium and magnesium is indeed a homemade chicken or any big bone stock, where you put enough bones and joints in there and salt, so the minerals from the bones leach and from the meats, actually, even like potassium would leach into the stock, and it has enough salt, and you drink that. And it's a good way to initiate a fasting. So that's kind of the thoughts I have, and I would suggest for them to measure blood sugar.
What's too high of a sugar level? What if you're in the hundreds?
I would say if they eat low carb, like if they eat 60 grams of carbs a day, and let's say it's only 3 meals, that's about 20 per meal, right?
Yeah.
So anywhere between 15 and 20, maybe they do a 5 or so for the snack. It shouldn't, if it's a good response, less than 120.
Okay.
After eating, and it's okay for them if they have enough strips and they don't mind doing like 1 day of full testing where they do curves, like every 20-30 minutes they test before they eat, and every 20 minutes afterwards, and they put the time and what's the blood, so to see what's the excursion. Okay. Fasting less than 100 for sure is ideal. If they wake up with elevated fasting blood sugar, that means, it's a miscommunication between the liver and the insulin. Counter-regulatory hormones kick in, like cortisol and adrenaline. If it's not enough insulin in the blood, actually cannot. And I'm going in circles. When these hormones, like in the morning when we wake up, they go up, the liver starts to release more glucose into the bloodstream. So if we wake up, let's say, with over 100 fasting blood sugar, that tells us that there's not enough insulin actually for it to tell the liver to stop. It's enough blood sugar. So in that case, the person might want to look at how late they eat at night and what they have, maybe a snack that has more protein and fat to see if they can offset that. Look at the sleep patterns. So I don't know if I'm answering the question. It's complex. That's why it's best to coach those people, to work closely with the person, to have a picture of what happens every day, what are the circumstances, what's the stress level, the sleep, again, what types of foods we eat. Do they have artificial sweeteners, although they keep the 60 gram? Do they also have, because that also can affect insulin.
Yeah. And I'll add just one final thing and we'll move to our next question. When I hear that response that, I tried low carb in the past, it worked wonderfully for me, and that was a decade, 2 decades ago, and now it doesn't work, they assume that it no longer works for them. And what I really try to get across is your point, which is the point of all of our talks, is the abundance of insulin. The body is producing too much insulin. The insulin no longer works as good as it used to, or as well as it used to, and therefore the body produces either a overabundance, even at the what we call the basal rate, the body is secreting an abnormally regular level of insulin, which is impeding the fat burning process, and that's and it's keeping patients in people in the carb adaptive state or the fat storage state. And so my advice it really echoes yours to reduce the total carbohydrates, especially if they don't have a glucometer. Let's incrementally reduce those. Instead of 60, let's cut that in half. Let's go down to 30. And then when push comes to shove, the intermittent fasting is a great way to really, when a person's ready, to kick off that fat burning process. And especially if people are stuck, I love implementation of the fasting if they're ready to do it. And I would say if a person's been trying this for 6 weeks, they're tired of feeling tired. So I think they would be more willing to try out a fast, at least with a 16-hour fast for sure. So that was good. So our next question is, we get this as well. People are getting used to eating more fat. We're trying to. We're giving the information that fat is not bad for us, especially some of the saturated fats and the monounsaturated, of course. Avoiding the fats coming from things like vegetable oils, of course, trans fats. I think everyone has a good knowledge of that. But what is some advice we can give to our patients who want to get more fat in the diet without eating meat all the time? And we hear that a lot. We hear that, oh gosh, you want me to eat bacon and steak and prime rib and beef jerky and cheese all the time. And it's not really about that. I mean, yes, we like those things, but I think people want a little more information from other fat sources that maybe we're not really thinking of. So this is your expertise, I think. So please let us know where we can get some more fat in our world.
Yes. So when we talk about animal food, like meat, they provide us with more protein than fat.
Right.
So I think the easiest way to add in more fat, plant fat, because it seems like that's the question. How can I add more fat, but that's not of animal source?
Correct.
So when you cook your vegetables, you can always add to the dish olive oil after it's cooked. If it's a salad, of course, you would make it with olive oil. If it's any other way cooked vegetables, or even to your meats, you can drizzle olive oil. You can put some garlic cloves in your oil, basil, some hot pepper flakes, and let it sit in, and it becomes flavored with.
Okay.
So you add that to your even to your meat. Olives are a great source of fat. Avocados, nuts and seeds, but nuts and seeds, I would say don't overdo it, only because they do come with more omega-6 fats, and they can also increase the total protein and carb intake in the end. So if you want to do like pure fats, you have to think of oils basically. And those are the oils. Then also from the plant foods, we can add again to our cold meals would be the flaxseed oil, the hemp seed oil, and the seeds itself. Like the hemp seeds, chia seeds are also a good source. So I think that's kind of the vegetable sources of good fats. Olives and olive oil, coconut oil, avocado. I'm not saying avocado oil because I feel like it's more of a refined product, but if people are not so strict about that, avocado oil is an option as well. And then we have the seeds and the oils from those seeds, like flax seeds, hemp seeds. We have chia seeds, and that's pretty much right. Yeah. I think I include them all. And then nuts and seeds in general, like macadamia, pine nuts, walnuts, all of these are good. But again, look at them as a complex food that has everything. It has a little carb, a little protein, a little fat. Okay.
Let me ask. So a lot of times, especially with the kids, I think like myself, like a lot of parents, we are now, my wife and I, we're now really trying to focus in on the fat and the protein that our kids get, because from our creation, we need to bribe them. Of course, we have created carb adaptive children very, very quickly here in life, right? So as soon as they're able to eat, we're giving them carbohydrates in mass quantities. And so we try to be opportunistic, very much so, with our fat introduction. And thank goodness the kids like it. They like broccoli, but they love it with butter on top. They love it with salt on it. The green beans taste better with salty butter on them. So we are definitely, when I feed them toast in the morning, I'm slathering it with cream cheese. Would you say it's the right thing? Now take the kids out of it. For adults, is it, when we're eating something, should we be asking ourselves, where's the fat coming from? So if I'm having a salad, of course, I'm going to put a dressing on it. Most people do. But is it the same thing with, say, a vegetable? Would you encourage people to, if they're getting a vegetable at a restaurant, to ask for a side of butter, ask for a side of olive oil, to add in that fat? What would you say?
Absolutely. First, we know fat will help us absorb the fat-soluble compounds that are found in plants. All the antioxidants, the phytonutrients, and the plant-based fat-soluble vitamins like the beta-carotenes, for example. These are all fat-based compounds that cannot be absorbed in the absence of fat. So eating a salad with fat-free dressing or with no fat in it is not serving very much in terms of nutritional value that adds to you. It's more like a cleansing fiber source. So that's one reason. So I would say any salad, any like broccoli, asparagus, any side vegetable dish that you would order, don't be afraid to ask for olive oil if they have, to bring it to you on the side, or to ask them if they cook it in butter. Oh, sorry, I should have put this on silent. Ringing all over. I can't escape it. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So yes, add that. Be mindful for kids. I guess it's okay to, if we give them a bread or quinoa or potato or sweet potato, to add fat to it, because they are in the growing stage. And unless they are obese, if they're lean, slender, active children, they can, they can afford to get that insulin, fat storage, and growing signaling going on, and supports their growth.
Okay.
For us as an adult, since we don't grow any longer in height, we grow in circumference, so it will just stimulate fat storage. So if you eat any carbohydrate that's insulinogenic, starch-like, or fruits, it's best not to have them with fat.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's good. All right. Our next question. Here we go. Why do I have a hangover the next day after eating carbs? So this came up with, and we've had patients even say it's not even the next day. It's actually a few hours. Someone's low carb, they decide to have a, quote, cheat day or a cheat meal, and they really feel just lethargic. Is that all in their head, or is something going on there, Mihaela?
It's probably a combination of both. I think, first of all, these cheat days, I don't really like even to think about it. Cheat is when you cheat on your partner, on your spouse, not when it comes to food. It's kind of like a twisted way to look at food. It's like, I usually encourage people when they start the low carb to stick with it for a long term before they try a feast famine cycle, only because of that, because it's too soon. They will eat more than they would if they try 6 months into it or a year into it. Number one, it leads back to that foggy thinking and fluid retention. All of a sudden, it just messes up with the whole system. So I think it's best if you decide to do the low carb, give it a good shot, like stay on it, minimum 3 months, but I would say at least 6 months before you even think of trying something on the higher carb, more impactful carbs that lead to a greater need for insulin secretion. Because if you wait longer, your taste buds will be changed, given that you're not doing artificial sweeteners that still continue to stimulate your taste buds. And you will eat less of the sweet. You just don't have the same desire, and it doesn't have the same feeling, and your mind is over it also. So you will have maybe less, so you don't have the after effects. It's almost like the alcohol. When you drink too much, the next day you feel it. Maybe if you have a glass, it's okay, but if you have 3 glasses and you have them back to back, it has a total, like a cumulative effect on the body. So it's the same with carbs. Yeah. In my case, when I started this, again, it was for a very healing purpose and reason. I really wanted to heal my gut and to stabilize my mood, and blood sugar was on the list, but mostly was my gut, the way I felt in my gut and my moods. And I took it like I was 100% in. When people, it's hard, and I heard this phrase from my business coach. She said, in relationship to business, but it applies very well to health, 99% is hard, 100% is easy. Because when you have a 1% where you give yourself like, you know, right, any external influence or trigger will make you give in that 1% more often than you stick with the 90%. Then it makes it hard, because you can never get like a good full swing into the protocol. So when I started, I said, and I love dark chocolate, and now I can have again dark chocolate, right? But when I started, I said nothing. I'm not going to touch sugar. I'm not going to touch dark chocolate. That was I think the hardest for me at the time, to give up dark chocolate, because I was having every day. So just look at it. This is a phase in which I want to give my body a good, fair chance to reboot itself. Once you resensitize your body to insulin, you heal the gut, you rebalance the hormones, you'll be able to reintroduce some of the foods that you think they're so important, it makes life joyous. You will be able to bring them back. But look at it as this is a therapy. Like the doctor will prescribe you medication that you have to take, like the antibiotics, every 6 hours, right? You have to look at the time. Kind of like that. You want to look a little bit in a more rigid way, because that will actually set you up for success long term. Although in the beginning may feel a little bit strict, rigid. That I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, so, I love all those points, and I'll just add this. You know, we've talked about this before. What's so interesting about adopting this lifestyle? I think a good proportion of people report, I mean, a very high percentage of people report they feel better, and they don't really understand why they felt so bad before. But then when people start feeling good, that becomes very addictive, of course. And so it's really what we preach here is listening to your body. What is your body telling you? And now that I really feel this lifestyle facilitates that notion. So it's a sense of, if alcohol makes me feel bad when I have even a small amount on this diet, well, I don't like that. I like feeling terrific the next day. So it's interesting how alcohol consumption tends to go down because of that. If I feel tired after eating a smorgasbord of Korean food, maybe I keep that to a minimum, because I really don't like feeling tired after having that. So when the symptoms of high carb or carb loading or the cheat day manifest themselves, we have to, I personally recommend or recognize that I don't like the way I feel when I have those things after the fact. So I like feeling better more than I actually like the food.
The food, yes.
So it's
I agree.
It's really sort of self-regulatory in a sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Sticking to believe, yeah.
If I may share a personal experience, this summer when I went to Romania, I ate one of our traditional dishes that has polenta, so it's corn, and it's with cheese, so it's all the wrong combinations, right? Fat and carbs together. But anyway, I had a small amount at dinner, and then the next day, I remember we went out, and I felt the whole day like a mild headache. Not a headache, but my head wasn't clear. I was sluggish. I just didn't feel myself.
Yeah.
And I even remember I posted on Facebook and I said, you're so sensitive to how you feel that when you feel off like that, you immediately can connect it to the last meal.
Cause, yeah.
And like, I love that dish and I eat it every 2 years when I go to Romania to see my parents. I don't make it here anymore. But you know what? She made it again, my mom. And I said, I had enough. I like it, but like you said, I love more feeling good, having energy, having that sharp brain and feeling alert, not like I'm in some kind of a pressure cooker and I'm in slow motion.
Absolutely. And we have one more question here. And if our audience, we have a person that's joining us from Australia. So welcome to the chat.
And I think she said it's 3:30 a.m. there.
3:30 a.m. there.
Oh, no.
If you have any questions, please let us know. And then the last question we have here for everybody, this is pretty common stuff. Common question: should I worry about not being in ketosis? I know when people are really getting into this, and we've talked about this in prior chats, people love the idea that it's working. We want to, a lot of times weight is not tangible right away, or we're not seeing maybe clothes are shrinking a little bit. I'm not quite sure. Or our body's shrinking, clothes are expanding, right? So people like to, for whatever reason, I know how you feel about ketone strips, but people still use them. And they're not in ketosis.
Oh, the P.
What do we tell somebody like this who's getting frustrated and we don't want them to give up on this? How worried should they be about being in ketosis?
Well, I think unless somebody again has cancer and they want to manage, to make sure they create a metabolic environment that suppresses cancer growth, or they have a neurological condition they want to address with ketogenic diet. I wouldn't worry that much about measuring and getting the numbers or having the correct ratio between glucose and ketones, because that's what we look when we manage with ketogenic diet conditions such as I mentioned. First, I worried about how I feel. Second, because testing the ketone, it's a snapshot in time. So when you test it, maybe you just use them up, so the level is lower in the blood. And I'm not even talking about urine. Maybe because you just exercise and the muscle took some of the ketones, or maybe you had intense, brain activity for whatever reason. So not measuring always numbers that indicate that nutritional ketosis zone, which I can remind our audience is from 0.5 to 5 on a blood measurement. Doesn't necessarily mean you are not in a nutritional ketosis zone. What matters more is how you can measure if you are in a fat burning zone, let's call it like that, that promotes ketone production, is really your energy and your lack of hunger. Right. When you have ketones, when your brain is running on ketones and not on glucose as much, like the proportion between the fuels, you are not as hungry. Ketones have a suppressive appetite effect. You don't think about food. You're engaged in your work. That's when you know you are actually running on ketones. And the more keto adapted one person becomes, the more all tissues of the body, because each tissue and organ uses fuels in a slightly different way in terms of proportion between glucose, fatty acids, and ketones, right? The only one that can use only ketones and glucose is the brain. The muscle, however, they can use ketones, they can use glucose, they can use fatty acids. As when you become more fat adapted, that's why the longer you stay on it, the more efficient you become. The muscle may not want to use ketones; they would use more fatty acids, right?
Right.
So you may measure higher numbers of ketones, or maybe less, because the body breaks less fat, because now only the brain has a higher demand, the muscle not as much. Okay. Make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I think
and we have tissues that only can use glucose, so the liver takes care of that through gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis, like breaking down glycogen that gets accumulated. Although that seems to get a sparing effect. It looks like we have some questions coming in. Like the more fat adapted you are, the less you rely on glycogen. It's almost like it's a store that you have in there that the body doesn't go so much to it as it goes through the gluconeogenic pathways where it produces new glucose.
Right.
I'm getting into the erase that. No, I know I like to get into the technicalities of it.
Control and mastery over the biochemistry is amazing. I think it's wonderful. Let's answer our question. This is our from our vast audience out there in the world. We have a question. I've just started doing a 20-hour fast. Okay. Had a headache for 2 days after. Tired and moody. Is this normal?
After the fast? So during the fast was all okay? And so
then were you okay during the fast?
Half a kilo for just.
See if we can get a response here. Did you feel plenty of energy while you were fasting?
And so the question is, this came only after. Were you low carb before?
Yes, I've been doing low carb, high fat for 4 years.
Okay, and this is the first long fast?
And this was, let's ask that. Was this your first long fast? She's in Australia, so it takes some time. So yes, this was the first long fast, yes.
And it's not even that long. Well, so afterwards she had the headaches you said, and what else?
Afterwards, headache for 2 days after, tired and moody.
One possible explanation could be when we fast, and if we break more fat, like in a more rapid way, we break fats. If there is some toxins, right, that are stored in the fat, like fat stores, like maybe she has a higher toxicity. That's why I asked for how long. I should just 6 weeks a few years ago. So the more toxic a person is, the more rapid it breaks down fats, and those toxins get released into the bloodstream. Especially when we don't eat, it's a possibility of reabsorbing some of the toxins, because the detoxification that takes place in the liver, it's a complex process that has two phases, and both require nutrients, vitamins and amino acids. Mm-hmm. So when we don't eat, we don't get these nutrients. So it's a higher chance for feeling bad by absorbing toxins that get released into the system. So that is a possibility. I don't know.
Yeah. I have a few things I hear after fasting, and even personally speaking, I'll usually do a 24-hour fast several times a week, typically either because I want to or lunch that day, just it will feel rushed and there's really no need for it. And when I say fast, it won't be a water fast for me. Typically, it'll be a fat fast. So, so I want to be clear on that. So the several times when I've done the fat fast, 24-hour fat fast, and I break my fast, the first few times I broke my fast, I probably consumed a full 20 to 30 grams of carbs in the first 5 minutes of breaking the fast. So really went to town on some vegetables and some meats, and I noticed specifically that I'll usually go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. I was in bed at 8:30 that night. And I was in the middle. I work out at night because that's best for my schedule. And they're trying to do a workout, and I'm yawning as I'm lifting weights, and I'm thinking, this is not a good idea. So I stopped the workout, and I went to bed. I was just that tired. And so my explanation of that is a significant bolus or surge of insulin in my body. And then I had a significant crash after the fact, and my body is just not used to releasing even a increased amount of insulin, and I felt the effects after. So the next time, thereafter, when I'm breaking my fast, I'm generally starting very slow into the eating process. I'm having a bit of cheese, something with virtually no carbohydrates, all fat, and I really start the snacking process much earlier in the process, and then I'll have a larger meal, 30, 60, even 90 minutes after that. And I found that really works well for me when I break my fast.
Right. That's a good idea. Despite the fact that it's a short fast, right? That's a relatively short fast, 24 hours. Yes, it's good it's important how you break the fast also, to do with some fat. Maybe a tablespoon of almond butter or a slice of cheese, and then you start preparing your meal, and 1 hour later you can sit down and have a meal that's hopefully not too high in carbs.
So the question is the insulin part. So with my meal I had where I crashed several weeks ago, maybe it was several months ago now, I was with most of my meals, I will keep my carbohydrate intake to around 20 to 30 grams per day. And in this particular meal, I virtually had all of my carbohydrate in one sitting right away. And in response to that carbohydrate load, we'll call it, my body, as it's supposed to do, secreted a bolus of insulin to help me digest or process that glucose. And as a result of such, my theory is that my body probably over measured and gave me a little more insulin than I'm used to getting, but there's no more glucose in my body. So as a result, I think I'm fat adaptive. But apparently that day I wasn't, and my body really just shut down. But it causes
a rapid drop afterwards. That's why you felt.
Yeah. So likely my blood glucose really dropped dramatically, and I didn't measure that, but that would have been, if I do it again, I'll definitely measure my blood glucose after the fact and see if there's a correlation there.
A huge fluctuation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the headaches, the for 2 days afterwards, that could be a little bit of the toxins, that get absorbed into the system. So that's why lots of water, sweating. Anytime people do fasting, it's good to add ways to detoxify: sauna, sweating, coffee enemas. I mean, there are many. Fat adapted.
Fat adaptive meaning where our bodies are retrained to burn fat. We call it fat adaptive. We believe in two states of existence. Carb adaptive. I'll type this out. So there's carb adaptive, and then that's most humans. Most humans on this, or at least most Westerners, at least, are carb adaptive. And we're trying to become fat adaptive, like we are biologically designed. We come out of the womb burning fat, and in our first months of life, we are quickly converted into the carb adaptive world. That basically means that our body learns to preferentially burn carbohydrates for fuel as opposed to fat for fuel. And so the low carb, high fat world converts us hopefully back into the fat adaptive, meaning our body will prefer to, I don't even want to use that word, but our body will burn fat very efficiently, so there's no drop off. We basically get a unlimited energy supply when we're fat adaptive, virtual unlimited supply.
And I think a good word to describe it is flexible, metabolically flexible.
Great.
Where the body can switch easy from burning glucose to burning fat as fuel without feeling it in your life, actually.
And then this will be our last question here. What can I expect from a longer fast?
I think the first 3 days are the toughest, where you have like more cravings and headaches and it's hard. You think more about food.
We like this book as well by Dr. Jason Fung. If you don't already have it, The Complete Guide to Fasting.
Fasting, right.
And they really kind of talk about the ins and outs. And one of the authors who wrote Jimmy Moore, who wrote Living La Vida Low Carb, he's just highly successful personally with fasting and low carb, high fat. He really talks about his experiences. He really gives the details of his experimentation with fasting. And I think everybody's different and how they respond and when they feel they need to eat. And this is just such a wonderful guide for us, at least for beginners. And I would call myself a beginner faster. And I ultimately want to get up to longer fasts. I love the idea of the anti-cancer properties from fasting. So I'm very much personally in my beginning stage. And as I think most of my patients are as well, occasionally you'll be surprised and I'll be surprised and come across a patient who's been fasting for years. But that's not the norm yet. That's for sure. These are great questions, and thank you so much.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends if it's even recommended to do a longer fast, right? You have to look at the entire picture, health picture of the person, and what the goals are. Why would you fast longer to determine how long? Yeah, but nevertheless, fasting is. And there's a new book I think that came out. I'm trying to think of his name. He spoke at the last conference in Orlando, the cancer Cure for Cancer conference. His name is I can think of. I'll have to.
We'll post it on our comment section.
He had but he talks about the hardcore water fast.
Yeah.
The most healing, the most therapeutic, which again, it has great value. But I do recommend people, if they do that kind of fast, to work with someone to have supervision.
Agreed. We have some of our patients who want to embark on the 1 week water fasting, and we start them very slowly. They're actually coming into our office on a somewhat regular basis, often daily, for monitoring, and we have our body composition device. It's a scale in our office, and that's a fun thing to track is the how the body composition after water fasting. Just kind of neat stuff. We do that really just for our just to gather some information. That's really neat. So, but if there's more questions, please ask away below. These are just a few questions we touched on here today, but the questions are there's an infinite amount of questions out there and different ways to ask it. So please ask, utilize us. We'd like to coach as many people as we can in this lifestyle and spread the word. And we're so glad it's spreading in our own towns, obviously in Australia as well. So thank you.
Everywhere. And I wanted to say, if any of our listeners want to right now at this time, I'm not taking new coaching clients, but I do offer 2-hour intensive sessions where they can pick my brain. Basically, I look at what they're doing. They can ask me any questions. I can help them come up with a plan.
Okay.
So they have a plan of action, and they do as much as they can on their own. And if they want to coach down the road, I think I will open again end of November or beginning of December. But that's something that they can take advantage of. And I can put a link to it, to those intense 2-hour sessions in which, we brainstorm, we look at what they're doing, what their questions are, what they struggle with, what they can change so they can make progress. They don't have to stay stuck. Sometimes people that are self-learners, self-doers, that's all they need. Someone to help them gain clarity and a direction so they can go to the next level.
Absolutely. Community is so important. And if you're not in a town like Tampa, Florida, or in Melbourne, Florida, or all over the U.S., this isn't a widespread topic just yet. And so if you don't have the resources of a professional like myself or of Mihaela at your disposal, and there's no low carb practitioners, nutritionists, physicians in your area, this is where community is so important. And this, where we share ideas, share recipes, share struggles. That's how the information is spread. So the community starts with us, and it's up to us to really spread that. So I will encourage everybody to nurture their low carb communities.
Our groups, and I have a group, and we have the Facebook pages, and I don't know if you do any virtual work, but my work is all virtual. So I use video conferences to do my coaching. So anyone from anywhere can work with me if they want.
Wonderful.
That's not a problem.
Well, we'll let everybody go today. Again, fire away with any questions after the fact, and we're here to answer your questions. And we'll be back next week to talk about. I don't know. We'll see what we're talking about.
I think next week we're gonna talk about gut health, how that one overlaps with overall health and with the low carb.
Wonderful. And I know at some point I really want to, because we're seeing it more often, our patients and doctors out there, they want to know too. They want to learn this. They crave this information just as I crave it. And a lot of times we learn from a lot of times we do learn from our patients. Yep. And so at some point I want to talk about the lab work that I think is important to track over time, that anybody can get, easy to understand. It doesn't have to be super special. Any lab will have it. So I'm really excited to discuss that in the future as well. So thanks.
That would be after the gut health then. We already have planned the next 2 chats.
Excellent. All right, good. This is great.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
And you, Dr. Griffin. Bye.